Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today, we are speaking with Maryanne Piña Frodsham. Maryanne is the CEO of Career Management Partners, CMP, a talent and transition firm in the business of developing people and organizations across the full talent life cycle. She is an executive board member, keynote speaker, and a member of the Forbes Business Council. Maryanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Enrique. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone.
Well, I'm so glad that you're sharing this time with me as we are in the mix of Hispanic Heritage Month, but we also combining this with this great topic. So we'll be speaking about attracting top talent, how to position your company for the perfect hire. And typically I'm interviewing for information for leaders. But this time around, I want to focus on the company because guess what? Everybody gets hired and they become leaders in positions, but it's the company that's hiring those. And so we want to address those things today. But before we get into that conversation, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, where do I start? Let's see. Maryanne Piña, originally born and raised in McAllen, Texas, for the Rio Grande Valley. If you don't know where that is, it's the southernmost part of Texas. I'm currently based in Dallas, Texas now, and I am CEO of Career Management Partners. You know, I'm really proud to say that we are the only Latina-owned firm that does what we do in the talent space. So we do executive recruiting, leadership development, a lot of executive coaching, and then outplacement services. And so for those of you that aren't aware of what outplacement is, if any time in the news you hear, hey, there's a layoff happening, that's what my company does. We support those people through the career transition aspect of things.
Outstanding. And as we're talking about how companies position themselves for talent, I want to address, firstly, what are the key steps that companies should take to build a compelling employer brand? Because we know how important that is. I'll tell you, I just won't work for anybody, right? They have to have something that attracts me to them. But to build a compelling employer brand that attracts top talent in this competitive market.
Yeah, you know what? You're not alone. I think we all have a choice of where we want to be and who we want to work for. And one of the things when it comes to recruiting specifically Hispanic talent, I do believe that the core values of an organization need to be highlighted a bit more. We know that as Latinos, they need to touch our heart before the head. And so our organization's really doing that. I think so. I do believe that some organizations are doing it better than others. You have the list of top employers to work for as Hispanics and Latinos, and there's a variety of reasons for that, right? And so I do believe that the core values that are aligned with the Hispanic talent when you're recruiting is key to that. I think also having that consistent and authentic messaging of who they are as an organization is key. You know, a lot of times you go into like Glassdoor or even Reddit accounts and you take a look at what is the company culture really like. So how are they really portraying their employer brand is key to recruiting top talent, because, you know, the website is one thing. Social media, as we were talking about earlier, we're in a digital age. And so making sure that the employer brand is all across the board, the exact same messaging is key to recruiting that top talent.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the communication. We'll talk about that. But as folks that are looking for work with certain companies, you stated this perfectly. Hey, there are platforms that go on to talk about these companies, and a lot of them give you great inside guide. So you have to do your due diligence in terms of who you want to go and work for. But a lot of them are highlighted in these platforms and they get real down in the weeds about how they recruit, how they retain, how they encourage, how they develop their folks. So great point there. Now, as we focus on the messaging, how can companies effectively communicate their values, culture, and long term vision to potential candidates during the recruitment process?
I think it starts with that first touch. You'd be interested to hear. We're living in the digital era, right? And we know that AI is just taking over a lot of aspects of not just business but employment, the workforce. And so one of the things that we're seeing now is companies are using AI for that first interview. So talk about that lack of high touch with candidates. When I think about communicating your values and your culture, if you're saying you're high touch, but you use an AI bot to do the first interview, yeah, that's not quite aligned to your core values, right? So there is already a gap there. Since we are living in a digital age, making sure that your social media stands out. As I was mentioning earlier, if you were to go to find the culture of a company, one of the places you can go is obviously Glassdoor. We all know about Glassdoor, but more and more employees are using Reddit. If you haven't gone into Reddit for your company, give it a try. See what the people inside internally are really talking about the company, and to be able to see what that the culture really is like. Because I think so many times you can take a look at the website and see the core values, but are they really being lived out for the employees is a different thing.
That's a fact. Now, as business owners, we understand what value proposition is, but the employers have a similar thing that we refer to employee value proposition. So
Yeah.
what role does a well-defined employee value proposition play in attracting and retaining top talent, and how can companies refine their EVP for, let's say, maximum impact?
I think this goes back to what's the personal ROI. um, I think much more like it's a candidate market, right? So at one level, you have the choice to be able to say, okay, what's the best organization that I can work for, and taking a look at the personal ROI is key. And so when I think about employees and organizations, making sure that you have a clear understanding of what that career development can be, the benefits, whether that's career development or mental well-being, what is the ROI for you personally? And I think a lot of times organizations are doing a better job at that, especially now. You think about 3 4 years ago, mental health, the well-being wasn't a big aspect of recruiting anyone. That wasn't really a benefit that was talked about, but now 2024, it's a key thing for people. So talking about the employee value proposition is making sure that you are very well aware of what is your personal ROI. What are you going to get out of it? It's not, I'm hoping that it's not just a paycheck, right? I think most of us, especially in our community, we want that impact. But we also need that personal ROI in order to continue to grow and be challenged and become a better person and be the leaders that the organization needs.
That's so on point. As you're talking, I was reminded of a company that I had applied to, and one of the interviews, I had done my research, right? So I had points for when they say, "Hey, do you have any questions for me?" I was like, "Well, I sure do." And one of them was that one of their value propositions on paper, or let's say on the web, was that they focused on the development of their people. And I'm big on development. Obviously, I talk about it and teach about it. And I said, "Well, in on your website, you say this.
Right,
What is your plan for me in
right.
regards to that development?" And they couldn't answer it.
Yeah,
And I said, "Oh, there's a huge disconnect now because they're just hiring a body
right.
that will fit whatever they want out of that position, but have no intent, no real deliberate intent as to how they are planning to develop me." And needless to say, that did not last long because I already had done my homework. So for those of you that are out there looking for companies, uh, check that. But for companies that are hiring, remember what you said online, because you're going to have to probably answer for that. Now, when we talk about long-term holding on to folks, or maybe
Sure.
development, how should companies balance the need for immediate skills with the potential for long-term growth when positioning for their next hire.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to address something you just said, right? Because one of the things that is lacking is for people to understand when they're being hired by an organization is to have a clear understanding of what is their career pathway and the possibilities within that organization. And so your question to them that you asked and they couldn't answer it to you is a big red flag. Being able to understand if there is a career pathway within that organization, what does that really look like? And is that a fit for you is key to be able to understand. I think this is one of the reasons why as Hispanics, we get so bottled down into just the same role for 5, 10 years and we see no growth in it. Um, Now, in regards to your question about immediate skills and hiring, I think one of the things that is very important to understand when you're hiring people for your business is that don't hire for the immediate role, don't hire for the immediate skill set that you need only, right? I think there's a part of the software and the hardware aspect of things. The software really has to do with communication and the competencies of an individual. Those things can be taught, those are skills that can be learned through development, career development, leadership development. The important part when hiring is the hardware aspect of things, and the hardware comes with character and capacity. Tell me you're going to operate out of honesty, right? We all want to hire someone that's going to be honest, whether they make a mistake or not. And then the other piece about that really has to do with capacity, and that's the gray matter in an individual. We know through research and the stats when we do hiring for companies is that character and capacity truly do matter. That is something that are the predispositions. Those are things that are ingrained in an individual that cannot be taught. Character and capacity are the things that truly do matter. So when you're hiring, obviously hire for the skills that you need in the moment, but think about long term. How can that individual continue to grow within the organization? So those 4 C's are truly important when hiring an individual. So it's communication, character, capacity, and competency. Think about all 4 things when you're hiring someone.
Very important things to think about. And for those companies that are viewing this or listening to this in one way or another, it is important for you to have a plan. And look, if you get somebody like me come and apply for a job, I want to know that you have a plan just like I have a plan for you, right? And that relationship should go both ways. So great points there. Now, we find ourselves in a more remote, and I see a lot of positions when I'm looking through LinkedIn, remote or mixed, or you're here, but I hardly see any, hey, we're back in the office full on.
Mhm.
So, in the age of remote work and digital transformation, how can companies stand out in terms of benefits, flexibility, and work life balance to attract the best candidates?
One of the things that we've begun to see within organizations as we do recruiting is our organizations are leaning towards more result oriented approach, right? So if you're going to have a hybrid model or remote model, it's fine. I think companies are understanding that that's kind of what the market is wanting, employees are wanting, they're needing. And I think the pandemic was a big opportunity to showcase that's kind of where we're wanting in our work life balance. But with that said, the good thing is that organizations are taking that approach. I mean, there's a couple things that come to mind already where there's unlimited PTO for some organizations, right? Because the mind frame is get the job done, get the results, and then we'll be okay. So it's not so much about how many hours are you putting in the office, it's about are you getting the job done. And so when I think about organizations and hiring, that is a trend that is happening. I think it'll continue, and I think that for individuals in the workplace trying to find that balance, a remote and hybrid role is, in the coming months, coming year and a half or so, it'll be something, a trend that we'll be able to take advantage of.
Absolutely. Now, I love that the unlimited PTO portion of it because there's some people that they finish their job. There's nothing more that they're going to do right there. And so once they're done, if you're on an hour type of work schedule, you'll spend 2, 3 hours just kind of like figuring things out by the time you leave, right? And so when you get that incentive to, hey, do that job, do it well, make the best out of that time, and then, hey, I give you back to your life. That's a great proposition for most people, if you ask me. So glad that some companies have gone to promoting that type of stuff. Now,
Mhm.
Maryanne, you are on LinkedIn, you're on a lot of the social things, you're doing a lot, your company's doing a lot, you're at events. So what do you have coming up as a company and individually? And how can the viewer or listener get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. And, one of the things that we do have coming up, specifically for Hispanic Heritage Month, here at CMP, we have launched a series of complimentary events for Hispanic Heritage Month for the Hispanic community. So, whether that's the Latino Career Assessment with a debrief, or career chats, or mentor circles, find me on LinkedIn. Glad to share more about it. It goes up until October 14th, I believe. So the events go up to October 14th. So if there's anything that interests you, please reach out. I'm always glad to help.
Outstanding. And we are so happy to have had this opportunity to speak with you. Thank you for celebrating with us Hispanic Heritage Month. I know that we have plenty to go, but hey, I remind everybody, Hispanics and Latinos, you don't have to have a special day. We make sure that we celebrate the entire year long for some reason or another. So thank you, Maryanne, for spending this time and sharing your wisdom around this topic for companies. And I hope that those companies that were viewing and listening got some nuggets for them to be able to implement into their day to day. Well, folks, I want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, The Outlier Project, and Duco. If you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to our show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast or want to sponsor our show, please let us know by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And this podcast is brought to you by StreamYard, a browser based tool that lets you live stream to any platform and record podcasts in studio quality. And we're using it to record this show. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.
Thank you so much for the time.